This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to look at the legacy of billionaire conservative donor David Koch, who died on Friday at the age of 79 from prostate cancer. David Koch, who was worth some $42 billion, and his brother Charles Koch, poured massive amounts of money into right-wing and libertarian causes over the past 4 decades, including funding climate change denial through conservative think tanks and politicians. The Koch brothers founded the political advocacy group Americans for Prosperity in 2004, which is credited with turning the Tea Party into a full-fledged political movement. The Kochs also backed right-to-work efforts, which aimed to weaken labor rights and quash union membership. The brothers made their fortune running Koch Industries, the second largest privately held company in the United States. They were oil barons. Just last week, the business journalist Christopher Leonard published a major new book examining the business dealings of the Koch brothers. It's titled Kochland, The Secret History of Koch Industries and Corporate Power in America. He just wrote a piece for the New York Times headlined, David Koch was the ultimate climate change denier. Christopher Leonard joins us now from Kansas City. Welcome to Democracy Now! Why don't we start there with it wasn't really a synopsis of the book in any way, because this is a tome. Congratulations on writing it, Chris. But David Koch was the ultimate climate change denier. Now, if he was one individual, that's his own business. But this affected the entire country. Explain what Kochland is and how he and his brother had such a massive effect on the issue of climate change and denialism in this country.
Yes, I will. And maybe to start, we could back up and look at the corporate empire that made David and Charles Koch the richest, some of the richest people in America. They've owned this privately held firm in Wichita, Kansas for decades, Koch Industries. And as we said earlier, Koch Industries is one of the largest corporations in America. Its annual sales are bigger than Facebook, Goldman Sachs, and U.S. Steel combined. And the thing about Koch Industries is that it specializes in the kinds of businesses that underpin civilization. You couldn't boycott Koch Industries if you wanted to. The company makes the fuel people use to drive to work. It makes the building materials in their office building, from the windows to the carpet. It makes the material in our clothing, like lycra, spandex, nylon, the stuff in diapers and exercise clothing. It makes nitrogen fertilizer, which is one of these products that most people don't think they even use, but it really is the bedrock of our modern food system. So what you see is that this corporation, it's sort of quietly working the gears and levers that make modern society work. And the results have been tremendously profitable for David and Charles Koch as they've owned this company. Together, the brothers owned 80% of the firm before David Koch passed away last week. So the important thing that you asked me about is climate denial and the political impact of this empire. And it traces back to the fact that Charles and David Koch, for decades, have been patiently working to reshape American politics. The brothers, the best term you could probably use for them is libertarian. They hold a very vehement anti-government view. They truly believe that society needs to be organized as a marketplace with only privately run roads, hospitals, insurance. They don't believe in Social Security. They don't believe in Medicare. So they've been steadily pushing back government regulations and programs like that. But of primary concern to them is any effort to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, because Koch Industries is deeply involved in the fossil fuels business. It owns oil refineries, pipelines, it trades global energy supplies around the world. And decades ago, this company realized that if the government regulates greenhouse gas emissions or even puts a price on emitting carbon into the sky, it could really hurt Koch's profits for decades to come. So the company has been, I think, unique and vitally important in derailing any action on climate change going back to the early 1990s.
So you talk about carbon being at the heart of Koch's business and also Koch's future. You talk about the refineries and how they built them around the country, and then the political wing of their operation, if you will, in having to ensure that carbon is not regulated. Explain what they built.
Absolutely, I will. And I'd like to say this came from, I remember an interview I did a few years ago with a former senior lobbyist at Koch Industries, and I said, you know, what got you up in the morning? What was your front burner issue? And the answer was carbon. This is what motivated the company. Fossil fuels put gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions into the sky every year for free, essentially. And the cost of that pollution will be borne by society for decades. It's what we call in the business community, it's an externality. You get to externalize the cost of that pollution. So if a price is put on that pollution, it changes the entire economics of fossil fuels production. And the big threat to companies like Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, Chevron is that this could hurt demand for fossil fuels in future decades. So when that happens, all these investments you have, billions of dollars sunk into oil refineries and pipelines, that investment becomes less and less valuable as demand for fossil fuels falls. So it's not easy to change American public policy. That I learned reporting this book. And Koch Industries and Charles and David Koch have been remarkably smart, patient, and strategic in their approach to affecting U.S. policy. And they built this machine to do it that is unrivaled in corporate America. You know, when I started reporting this book, I thought I was going to be writing a lot about campaign donations and super PACs. Boy, was I wrong. The real action always starts the day after the election. That's where Koch Industries has its real expertise, and that's where it shaped public policy. So to do that, Koch has one of the largest corporate lobbying operations in the United States, located about a block from the U.S. White House. Then it funds and supports a constellation of think tanks in Washington, D.C., like the Cato Institute or the American Energy Alliance. And what these groups do is they seed the ground in Washington with Koch's ideas. These libertarian, anti-government ideas are made mainstream by groups like the Cato Institute, and they help force the conversation. They help shape the conversation. Along with that, you have this network of campaign donors who will, in an election cycle, sometimes give more money to political campaigns than the actual political parties themselves. Hundreds of millions of dollars to entice politicians to embrace the Koch point of view. And then finally, perhaps most importantly, Koch has built a nationwide activist network called Americans for Prosperity. And what this is a boots-on-the-ground operation. So Americans for Prosperity has chapters around the country. They can activate people to go knock on doors, take petitions. They will charter buses from West Virginia, North Carolina, Missouri, Ohio, you name it. They will get buses of angry voters to come to Washington, D.C., and then go visit congressional offices that have been specifically identified by that big corporate lobbying shop we talked about, where they can pressure lawmakers. And Koch put this political machine into full force in 2009 and 2010 when it looked like the United States was going to regulate greenhouse gas emissions for the first time. You know, back then, there really was bipartisan support to do something on climate change. The Republican John McCain ran on doing something about climate change. But Koch Industries intervened, and I think more than even Exxon or other companies, it politicized this issue of climate change. And Koch went after any moderate Republicans who acknowledged that climate change was real, who supported any effort to put a price on carbon. And Koch helped drive those people out of office. So it played a vitally important role in making it clear to Republicans that they could not support any effort on climate change.